And turn to Exodus chapter 35. Exodus 35, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. It's the Jewish Bible as well. I guess it's called the Torah, not the Bible. And a little background before we start reading this today. So God's people at one time were in Egypt, right? They were thriving, then they ended up slaves, and then God delivered them out of there. They took them out, remember crossing the Red Sea, then they're out in the wilderness. Then they get to this mountain, Mount Sinai, and people argue about where it's at. I tend to believe it's like on the other side of, way over in the past both of those seas. But wherever it was, they're out in the wilderness near this mountain, and Moses goes up on the mountain. God speaks to him, gives him like lightning chisels it. I don't know how he does it on the tablets, and Moses comes down with the tablets. They're worshiping the golden idol, right? He breaks the tablets. Then, I don't know if you know, he goes up a second time and gets a second set of tablets, and then he comes down again, and God's given him commands to tell the people and everything, and that's where our story picks up today in Exodus 35, is after they've already had all of that. They're out there. Remember, they're being provided for by manna on the ground every day and just all of this. They're out there in the desert. Have you been to the desert? Like actual desert? I grew up in the Southwest, and there's some serious desert out there. And I don't like the desert, personally. And they're in the desert right now. So here we go, Exodus chapter 35. Y'all got it? Exodus 35. We're going to read quite a bit here, and it'll get us a context of what's going on. Moses assembled the whole Israelite community and said to them, "These are the things the Lord has commanded you to do. For 6 days work is to be done, but the seventh day shall be your holy day, a day of Sabbath rest to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it is to be put to death. Do not light a fire in any of your dwellings on the Sabbath day." So you're picking up, right? He's come down from the mountain. Actually, if you even look back at the last verse of 34, Moses would put the veil back on his face until he went back to speak, because his face was still glowing from being in the presence of God. And then he comes down and he's supposed to say these things to the people. And the first thing God tells his people is, Sabbath. Take a Sabbath, right? All right, verse 4. Moses said to the whole Israelite community, "This is what the Lord has commanded. From what you have, take an offering for the Lord. Everyone who is willing is to bring to the Lord an offering of gold, silver, and bronze, blue and purple and scarlet yarn and fine linen, goat hair." You got any of that? Goat hair? Ram skins dyed red and another type of durable leather, acacia wood, olive oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil and for the fragrant incense, and onyx stones, if I'm saying that right, and other gems to be mounted on the ephod and the breastpiece. All who are skilled among you are to come and make everything the Lord has commanded: the tabernacle with its tent and its coverings, clasps, frames, crossbars, posts, and bases. This may feel like a list, because it is, right? But I thought about, should we read the list or not? And we're going to do it, because I want us to soak in what this is here. Where did I leave off? The ark with its poles and the atonement cover and the curtain that shields it, the table with its poles and all the articles and the bread of the presence, the lampstand that is light with its accessories, lamps and oil for the light, the altar of incense with its poles, the anointing oil and the fragrant incense, the curtain for the doorway at the entrance to the tabernacle, the altar of burnt offering with its bronze grating, its poles and all its utensils, the bronze basin with its stand, the curtains of the courtyard with its posts and bases, and the curtain for the entrance to the courtyard, the tent pegs for the tabernacle and for the courtyard, and their ropes, the woven garments worn for ministering in the sanctuary, both the sacred garments for Aaron the priest and the garments for his sons when they serve as priests. All right, so Moses comes down and first he talks about Sabbath, and then he says, what are they doing here? Like, what are all these things coming in for? Because God wants them to build a tabernacle for him, a tent of meeting where God's going to dwell. They didn't have it at this time. And later it ends up the temple, and then later after that it ends up our body, right? Because this is where God dwells now, right? But then it was this tabernacle of meeting. This is the first place where God is actually going to come. Well, I guess earlier he was walking in the garden with them, right? But then the relationship got broken, and now he's actually a place where he can come and dwell, and then they can come worship. This is that first place, right? And he's saying, I bring in all of these things to set it up. Okay, so what things stood out to you from the list? This is where you tell me. Like, what were the important focus parts from the instructions? Curtains and decorations, they seem menial, right? Like small things, but those things, curtains, decorations, basins. What else? Goat hair? That was because I said I don't have any goat hair. Lampstand, gold and silver. Dishes. Lighting. There needs to be lights in there. Tent pegs. That one stands out to me, right? What if I don't have very much? God, you want me to bring? I can bring tent pegs. Okay. All right. Onyx. There's like precious gems. So there was gold and silver, precious gems, curtains, tent pegs. I mean, it kind of covers the whole spectrum here, doesn't it? I mean, God in his wisdom goes, hey, people, I need you to decorate. You can all do it. You got a tent peg? You got a rope? Right? You got some skills? People, all who are skilled among you. That stood out to me. What if you don't have things, but you have skills? Okay? Like, youth? You know what skill you have that we don't have? I'm old now. I'm 38 and I got gray hair. You know what skill you have that I don't have? Energy. Thank you. Yes. And all the grown-ups say energy. But seriously, like, God comes to them and says, we're going to build this. And I bet the 14-year-old goes, I don't have gold. I don't have any onyx stones. But you got energy, you know? So what else? Actually, even in verse 5, I think this stands out too, and I want to point it out. From what you have, take an offering from the Lord. What's the next piece? Do you see it? What does it say? Whoever's willing. Okay, so I think that's pretty important too, right? Whoever's willing. Later it mentions garment makers too, and like maybe you can't build anything, but you can sew. You can sew. Three Amigos, right? That's one of my favorite movies. I remember an example. I was trying to think, when did this happen in my life? And I was in high school at summer camp. Thank you, high schoolers. I was at high school summer camp, and there was we did competitions all week long, but on the last day of camp, there was a great race. And there was like 20 stations. We needed at least 20 volunteers. And we got our team together, and they told us what the stations were. And people, like, there was the running station, run a mile. That wasn't me. I can't do that one. There was a bunch that I couldn't do. And what are you going to do? I don't know. There's the surprise bag, the paper bag. Then it was a surprise eating challenge. I could do a surprise eating challenge, right? I can do that. So I did. And seems pretty menial, surprise, but I knew there was something in that. There was something, right? But I could do it. So, and what was great about it, like, I could feel like I wasn't as good in the team because I didn't run the mile the fastest or whatever the fastest. I was just the eater, okay? But I kind of took that as a challenge too. I'm just going to eat. I'm going to do this awesome. And so our team came in, and I think we were in like 15th place or something at this point. And everybody's piled around this. Everybody has different things in their bags too. I think there was like 2 different things. And so I get my bag. Here comes my teammate. I open it up. It's an onion, a whole onion. I get an onion. Now, if you've ever tried an onion, uncooked, not cooked, we're in 15th place, and my mission is I'm going to do this the best, aren't I? So I powered that thing like an apple. You fight off the reflex, but I so killed it. And we left in 3rd place. You know, the onion eater. And that's not to say, well, I guess I'm pretty good at eating. But I felt in that moment like I was one of the most insignificant links on the team, but I could just eat an onion, right? But then nobody wanted to sit by me in the van on the way home. So, but still, now I want to go back. So we got this whole thing. God's asking them to bring the things in to decorate the temple. And I want to go back to verses 1-3 again, though. Why would he start then? Why would God say, go down and talk to the people and start talking about Sabbath first? This is where you tell me. Like, what is it?
Get their attention.
To talk about resting first? Okay, get their attention. What other reasons? So he gave them a big list. And before the list, he said, to rest? It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Well, the end result or maybe the beginning result. One or the other. There's a lot of work to be done. And I want us to, because this is a historical piece. Is this written to us today? No. It was written about them then, right? So we can't just take what God told them and say God's telling us that right now also. But we can take parts of it and go, what is universal about what God does with his people? And I think one of the things that's universal here is God has set up this pattern of work from the very beginning with the 7 days of creation. 6 days you'll work, 1 day you'll rest. And we forget that. We really do. And he comes in and he goes, people, you're going to build this house to worship me in. Remember, when you start working, you rest. First thing. Don't even start working until you thought about planning to rest. Do we think that way? I know I don't. I think, oh, my week, I'm going to get going, and then I forget. And I have to. So for him, he's saying, people of God, if you're going to be my people, put in the rest day first. I think that's really huge for us, right? As Americans especially. Yeah, we got to plan to rest. It seems so silly, but it's true, and they really had to plan to rest. Then going forward from and then with all of this stuff, we got gold and silver and all these precious things that they're bringing in. I think part of it too, symbolically, is if you think about how much, like, when do we earn? When did they grow crops? When did they care for their animals? Like, when did they earn their wealth? When did that happen? All week long, right? Like with us too. We got 7 days to earn. And God goes, hey, first, I want you to plan a day where you don't earn. Come on, God. Like, how am I supposed to take care of things when the first day you tell me to do is not earn? That's like, let's do the math. 1 out of 7 is 14.4%. Okay, so right off the bat, whatever I was going to earn, my earning potential is 14.4% down. And who gets that? Who gets that 14%? Nobody. Nobody does, right? It's not even earned. It doesn't grow. And nothing happens on that day. So what's earned on the day when we don't earn 14.4%? You see what God's doing here? Rest is earned. Regenerating so that we can do the work is earned. Anybody feel like you got to earn some rest? Put it in first. Then it's first. Plan it first. So I think that's one of those key things there. And then let's look at verse 20 and 21. How do God's people respond to this? Verse 20. Then the whole Israelite community withdrew from Moses' presence. So they left. He's I don't know where he's talking, but he's talking. He delivers all this word from God, and then they all leave. And everyone who was willing, there's that word again, and whose heart moved them, came and brought an offering to the Lord for the work of the tent of the meeting, for its service and for the sacred garments. All who were willing, men and women alike, came and brought gold jewelry, and then it goes into like a list that is almost identical to the list before. Verse 29, all the Israelite men and women who were willing brought to the Lord free will offerings for all the work the Lord through Moses had commanded them to do. So there's this pattern they did. They heard the word. They went back to their tents as families, likely, maybe large families as well, went back to their tents. And what happened there? What did they do in their tents? I mean, there was something. It doesn't say here, does it? They did something, and they came back with the things, whatever the things were. It doesn't say who brought what. It does say some people that brought skills. They were good at certain skills. But who brought what back? It doesn't say. And the Bible doesn't say what happened in the tents. And I'm kind of bummed that it doesn't say it. But then we can fill it in. Can't we? We can fill it in. So, well, what do you think happened there? What did they do in their tents? What were the things they talked about?
Probably how they felt about the meeting, how they were going to contribute,
Okay.
how this impacted their hearts.
Okay. So they talked about how they felt about it. How do you feel hearing this word from God? Actually, we didn't hear from God. We heard from Moses, who said he heard from God. Okay, so do we know that Moses even heard from God? Well, his face is kind of glowing. So that might be that he actually heard from God. Let's trust him. But still, how do I feel about that? Do you ever have that process? How do I feel about hearing from God? Because I'll just say it. Anybody who ever talks up here or teaches in a life group, their face is not glowing. Okay, so we are not the mouthpiece of God like Moses is right here. So we have to do this process. We go back to our tents. You're going to go back to a lunch table today. You're going to go back to your houses. You're going to go back to where, and what do we do? How do we respond to God? Like, so what else happened in that tent? They then looked at what they had, you said, and how are we going to respond? What else do you think happened in that tent? Yeah. This is all we got. We're in the desert, and there's no Harris Teeter. There, so what are we going to do there? That's huge. Like, how much do we have that we can actually let go of? And then the planner in me is like, if we all give them this stuff, who's then going to carry it all? That's kind of like, I can stop carrying all this. That's cool too. That's one little side of it that I think about. What else? Any other thoughts? What did they think when they went back to their tents? Thinking, feeling. What's that? Maybe. Oh, crud. We did work every day. What does that look like for us to not work that day? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and we can make that, we're really good at making things symbolic. Well, if I don't rest, then I'll die inside. Which is true. How many feel like you die inside when you don't rest? I do, okay? But then I think there's two pieces here as well, because God is God. He really is God. Do we forget that? I do. I've never seen him part an ocean physically. I've never seen the things that they saw, and I forget that he's the God. Do you forget he's the God? When God tells you what to do you rearrange everything because he's the God? I don't all the time. Love your family. Like for me, one of the commands is father sacrifice, husband sacrifice like Jesus sacrificed. And I go, yeah, that's great. And then do I go home and rearrange everything because God told me that? I don't. But he's the God. Like the God. I've seen there, I imagine this is Mount Sinai, and Moses was up there, and there was the storm with the lightning, and then he comes down and he's glowing. That God, I've never seen that physically. That's still the God that we worshipped him this morning. Do we respond like he's that, or do we respond like he's Jesus? Because he's both. He's eternally loving. He had John lean against him at a table, and they had a good time and ate, and he loved on them. And then he's the God on the mountain that with fire and lightning and storm, he's both. And so which one do I respond like he is? And so I think that's a piece. When we go back to our tents, how are we thinking when we rearrange? Every week, whatever the teaching is. And do we feel guilt when we go? Do we feel shame? Like when we're tense and we're hiding and we feel that, oh gosh, what everybody else is going to bring. So I got to bring so that I look good. Do we think that? If I bring, then people will give me privileges. Do I think that? I just wonder, what are all the things? And do you know God's okay with that part of our hearts? He really is, because Jesus is God too. And so we can go back to our tents and wrestle with all of those feelings. How do I respond to God? He's not surprised by our feelings and how we're feeling and how we respond. But then what do we do out of that? We've got to remember there's both pictures of God. I just got to remember both, right? Lion and lamb. We like the lamb side of God. He's also the lion. And so there's both of those. And so they came. What else? So what do you think kept? It doesn't say how many people gave. So people came back. They brought the things. What do you think kept some of the people from being generous with God in that time? It's probably similar to us, but we can say it was them, right? I have a friend who was. So what do you think kept them from being generous?
Fear of not having enough.
Fear of not having enough. You were talking about that too, right? We're in the desert. A piece about that, though, them not having enough. Rewind a few years. Where were they again? In Egypt. They were thriving for hundreds of years, and then Egypt goes, hey, who are all these people? There's a lot of these people. We need to make them slaves. And so they made them slaves, took their stuff, made them work. And then in order for them to leave Egypt, they were just all slaves. It's a whole nation of slaves. They had nothing. whatever they had, clothes on their back. And then there's this part when they're leaving, it's after the 10th plague where the oldest son was killed. It was the Passover time, right? And Egypt kicks him out. Fine, get out of here. And Moses goes, go ask him for things before we leave. And all the people go back and ask Egypt, hey, can we have some of those? We need some things. Like, we were just slaves, And and the Bible says that Egypt gave them everything they asked for and then kicked them out. No, yeah, okay, whatever you ask, get out of here. Just get out. You're bothering us. We don't want any more people to die. So if we rewind, where did they get all of their stuff? God. It was all provided. They were slaves, and their slave owners gave them gold and silver and everything in order to go out into the desert. Everything they had came from God. People of Indian Trail. Everything we have came from God. It's not ours, right? Yeah, spiritually, physically, we were slaves to sin. He freed us. Everything we have is his. And then we get to this spot, and he says, build me a place to worship. Worship me. This is what... Now bring it. Where did they get it from? From this miracle. But some of them, I would have that wrestle. Well, I don't have enough. They got more of that gold than I did when we left. I don't know what happened. How did they divvy it up? I have no idea. And so they had to do that wrestling. Will we have enough? Well, that's one of our questions. I think one of the other questions is that they probably doubted the goodness of God. Is he going to keep providing? I know there's manna on the ground every day, and it takes care of us. Is it going to be there tomorrow? We do that with God, don't we? It's been 300 days in a row of manna on the ground. He's pretty faithful. It's there at 7:31 every morning. And then, is it going to be there tomorrow, though? I don't know. I better take care of myself. We do that, don't we? I do that. But 300 and however many days, they were there for 40 years eating bread off the ground. At what point do I trust God? I'm 38, so I'm almost 40 years of bread off the ground. So when am I going to trust? High schoolers, I know you're not 40 years and you don't have gray hair yet, but how many years you got? How many years has God been taking care of you through your parents? It's for all of us. And then I wonder, there was this other piece too. I bet a lot of them went back to their tents, and even though everything they got out of Egypt, that was all that they had, that maybe their finances weren't even ordered. They hadn't thought about how much they had in a few years. And so, I don't know about for you, but every time there's this opportunity of, okay, God's asking me to do this, I go back and I go, I don't even know what, my life is in chaos. I don't even know what I have. So how can I know how much to give? I feel like if I give this much, that'll be unwise because I have to be taken care of, and you told me to take care of my family, and so I'm just going to give this little piece, and that's generous for me. And it is, isn't it? Like, that was a sacrifice, but I wonder how many of them could have gone back to their tents, and if they knew everything that they had, and they'd been planning ahead. There's this idea of planning ahead so we can be generous spontaneously. Like, if they didn't know when God was going to ask, when's God going to ask us to do something? Any day. We don't know. And when are we going to be ready to go back to our tents and find out how much we can be generous with? Are we ready for God? We got to prepare to hear from God. Otherwise, we go back to our tents just like them and go, okay, all right, God wants me to do this. I'm going to obey God because I love him and because I feel like I'm supposed to, whatever those feelings are. Okay, so what can we do? All right, I don't know. I know maybe we can do this part right here. Let's take the tent pegs. Maybe. Or we've got 4 golden bowls. Let's give one of them because we can share. But we don't actually know. Because I think there's, if we just like take your financial picture, whatever it is, whether you're in junior high all the way up to wherever. And do you know the exact line where if you gave that much to anybody who was in need, that now you would be entering faith land? Do you know the exact line? We need $2,192.47 every month. And if we give anything past that, we're now trusting God. Do we know where that line is? Can we figure it out? It's part of planning to be generous, right? We got to plan so that when God calls us, we can actually do it. And so I don't know how many of them couldn't come back because they hadn't figured it out, and they brought back something, and it was generous. It really was, wasn't it? But was it all that they could be generous with God? Was it all that God could do through them? I imagine there were some of them that felt bummed out that was, I don't know. Well, we're going to do this. And I know I'm in that place a lot as well. Then look at, even still, through all of them, because we're God's people and we're not perfect. We're this giant mixed bag of church. Look at what God does in chapter 36, verses 4 to 7. The skilled workers who were doing all the work on the sanctuary left what they were doing. In verse 5, and said to Moses, the people are bringing more than enough for doing the work the Lord commanded to be done. Then Moses gave an order, and they sent this word throughout the camp. No man or woman is to make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary. And so the people were restrained from bringing more, because what they already had was more than enough to do all the work. So this is, everything's taken care of. Stop giving. Stop bringing. Good job. And this is all of the mixed bag. The people who had everything in order and knew how much they could be generous. It was the other people who were the giant mess and were just bringing their generosity. All of that took care of it. Because that's what God does. He takes care of it. He takes care of it. But then I think for us individually, back in our tents, how much blessing do we get from God? Like, how much can we be used individually? He's going to do all the work. It's his work, right? But then where are we in it? What's our piece? What's our life?